Welcome back, Night Dweller. I'm your host, Mothy, and tonight we take a journey down an unfamiliar path, a path where curiosity and unease walk hand in hand. Tonight we follow a man who strays from the familiar and steps into a hidden path deep in the forest. Listen closely as the forest reveals secrets older than the trees themselves and mysteries that may chill the blood. This is only the beginning of Where She Waits.
Tune in close, dim the light, simple dark tales late at night.
Tendril like shadows stretched over the forest floor as he walked along the narrow dirt path. The faint scent of damp earth hung in the air, mingling with the sharp aroma of decaying leaves. The forest canopy, heavy with age, allowed only fractured beams of moonlight to pierce through. A pale, muted glow cast his surroundings in an eerie light. The fallen leaves he expected to be golden and vibrant had faded to a weathered taupe, their edges crumbling underfoot as if the forest's breath was stale and exhausted. An unsettling sensation simmered beneath his boredom. It gnawed at him, a whisper of discomfort that quickened his pulse in a way he couldn't quite place. Just up ahead, he noticed a narrow, parallel dirt path branching out beside a swollen, sagging bridge. The bridge's moss-covered planks seemed to sigh under the weight of years gone by. This offshoot trail looked well worn but neglected, as if carved by adventurous youths who had since been scared away. Curiosity, that quiet devil, whispered in his ear. With a half smile, he veered onto this hidden route. The path dipped slightly, cradling a shallow waterway. Its edges were littered with mossy lumps, half submerged in stagnant water, emitting a faintly coppery smell that prickled his senses. Beneath the thick blanket of dead leaves, he could hear the faint rustling of unseen creatures, shifting as if disturbed by his presence. He ran a hand through his tangled hair, gritty and damp from the cool night air. An inexplicable urge to appear calm and collected crept over him, though he couldn't say why. As he rounded a bend, an opening emerged, flanked by ancient twisted trees. They loomed over him, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for something lost. In the center of the clearing stood a mound, unnatural and solitary, rising like a sentinel above the forest floor. Dying grass lay around its base, while a few stubborn stalks sprouted defiantly at the top. A single row of mushrooms, deathly pale and slick, circled the mound. Their caps shone with an eerie luminescence in the dim light. A shiver prickled his skin, spreading across his back like cold fingers. His breathing quickened, thickening with each intake, filling his lungs with the staleness of something forgotten. And then he saw her, a figure gliding toward him through the trees. Her movement was so soundless, so unnaturally smooth, that he felt as though he were seeing a dream. Her gown, an iridescent cobalt, flowed around her like water, clinging to her slender form before fanning out behind her. She seemed carved from moonlight itself, her skin glowing with an otherworldly pallor. Long, silvery hair cascaded down her shoulder, framing a face both delicate and unnervingly perfect. Her eyes were a piercing shade of indigo, and locked onto his, pinning him to the spot with a gaze both inviting and menacing. The scent of her, a blend of a night blooming jasmine tinged with a bitter metallic undertone, filled his senses. His thoughts clouded with an intensity that felt like drowning. He struggled to breathe, his chest tightening as if water pooled in his lungs. He tried to speak, to call out to her, but his voice twisted into silence. She passed him in a slow, drifting movement, close enough that he could feel a chill radiate from her skin, an icy presence that left goosebumps in her wake. She ascended the mound, each step as silent as snowfall, her gaze never breaking from his. His hand extended instinctively, desperate to touch her, to know she was real. But before he could reach her, she turned away, slipping into the shadows without a sound. He stood there, rooted in place, his body cold and aching, as if some vital warmth had been leached from his soul. When he finally regained his senses, he stumbled back down the path, feeling as if he had been awakening from a half-remembered dream. Hours later, he awoke on the floor of his apartment disoriented. His body was stiff, as though he had been laying there for days. Soil clung to his skin, his clothes damp and smelling of decay. As he sat up, he noticed dirt caked beneath his fingernails, gritty and dark, as if he had been clawing his way out of the earth. He grabbed his notebook with trembling hands, desperate to capture every detail before they faded. His pen scratched frantically across the page, but no words could truly capture her, her beauty, her impossible grace, the suffocating chill of her presence. Every line he wrote felt shallow, a shadow of what he had seen. Days slipped by, lost in a feverish blur as he scrawled page after page, filling his apartment with disjointed phrases and sketches of her face, her hair, her eyes that seemed to haunt him from every corner of his mind. Her image consumed him. Sleep became a forgotten luxury, replaced by dreams that felt more like memories, fragmented glimpses of her drifting in and out of shadows. He could still smell her, the scent of jasmine mingling with that bitter metallic tang, haunting him like a ghost. By the fourth night, he could resist no longer. He slipped out of his apartment, guided by an unrelenting pull, his body moving as if under a spell. The city lights faded behind him as he entered the forest, each step drawing him deeper into the embrace of shadows. The moon hung low, casting a dim glow over the twisted branches that reached out like bony fingers. His heart hammered as he followed the path, each step echoing in the suffocating silence, until he reached the clearing. The mound stood before him, bathed in a spectral light, the mushrooms at its base glowing faintly like tiny ghostly lanterns. He climbed to the top and sat, his body stiff and unyielding, his skin prickling with the cold seeping up from the ground. His eyes drifted shut and exhaustion claimed him. A feathery light touch brushed the nape of his neck, sending an electric jolt through his spine. He opened his eyes to see her standing beside him, her face illuminated by the pale moonlight. Her eyes gleamed with an intensity that stole his breath. She smiled, a slow, haunting smile, and the chill in the air deepened, wrapping around him like a shroud. Her hand reached for his, and he felt an unnatural warmth spread through him. The heat sank into his bones and dulled his senses. She pulled him up to his feet, her grip gentle yet unbreakable, guiding him deeper into the forest. The trees closed in around them, branches intertwining overhead, casting shadows that stretched and swayed. Yet, despite the darkness, he could see her clearly, her figure glowing with a light that seemed to emanate from within. Suddenly, she let go, darting ahead, her laughter, a sound as delicate as glass, echoing through the trees. He chased after her, heart pounding, his footsteps frantic. Desperate to keep her in sight, he pushed himself forward. She moved faster, her movements a blur, her scent lingering like a fading dream, urging him onward. He stumbled, his foot catching on a root, and he fell to the ground with a heavy thud, pain shooting through his knees, but he forced himself up, dazed, only to find himself once more at the base of the mound. She stood there, waiting, her eyes glimmering with a strange, predatory gleam. Slowly, she raised her hand, revealing a small, shriveled object, a dark, desiccated butterfly. Its wings were edged in a deep, unnatural crimson. Without thinking, he reached out, his fingers brushing the brittle wings. They felt dry and fragile, as if they'd crumble beneath his touch. And as he touched it, a chilling sensation washed over him, an icy tendril snaking up his arm into his mind. His vision blurred, and he felt himself fading, sinking into an endless, unyielding blackness. The last thing he saw was her smile, no longer delicate, but sharp and cruel. It was a smile that spoke of secrets he would never understand. When dawn broke, the clearing lay empty, save for a faint trail of disturbed earth leading away from the mound. The forest remained silent, holding its secrets close, and no one would ever know of the man who had wandered too deep, who had fallen under the spell of the creature who waited, eternally patient, for the next soul to stumble upon her path.
That concludes today's episode. Join us next week for another spine-tingling tale here on Simple Dark Stories. If you enjoyed this and would like to help out, please give us 5 stars and let us know what haunts your dreams. Until next time, bye-bye.